for joining us today. I sort of wish that you all had been here for the first part of the conversation, because we were having a fascinating conversation about the refugee crisis and denominations of churches and all that sort of thing. So it was quite interesting. My name is Katrina VanHuss, and I'm here today with Mary Catherine Hinds and with Debbi Stanley. Mary Catherine is with Crop Hunger Walk, Church World Service, and Debbi is with RallyBound. So just to make sure that we're in good shape here, could a couple of you chat me your current location? Chat it to the whole group, and that way I'll know that you can hear us and see us. And if you could let me know you can see my screen as well, that would be great. Richmond, Virginia. Thank you, Mackenzie. All right, and Mackenzie, and Madison. Well, yay, welcome. Mary Catherine, can you let us know that you're online?
Hi, I'm here.
Excellent. And Debbi, we can hear you as well?
I am here. Welcome, everyone, from sunny Southern California.
Oh, you didn't have to go that far. That's not nice. It's raining.
It's actually raining a little bit, so.
Okay.
That makes you feel better.
I feel better. I feel better. All right. Well, I have to say this is a really nice group to work with. We've had a fun time putting together this deck for you, and we are excited about sharing with you what we have. So, with that, our agenda today is. Hang on, folks. Hang on just a moment. A little bit of technical difficulty here getting my slide to present. We'll do it this way. Okay, here we go. So Mary Catherine is going to talk to us about the Crop Hunger Walk, what it is, and then we're going to move into the difference in platforms, and then we're going to talk about what the Turnkey group recommended and used, which was recognition and delivered through messaging and also gifts, and then we're going to look at the results. So first off, Mary Catherine, could you tell us a little bit about the Crop Hunger Walk?
The Crop Hunger Walk is the largest funding source for the development work of Church World Service. And Church World Service began in 1946, right after the World War II, and in a response to war-torn Europe and wanting to share our blessings. And at the time we had a bumper wheat harvest in the Midwest, and so the CROP, Christian Rural Overseas Program at the time, was formed as a way to set aside acreage to share, to put on trains and ships and send over to Europe. So those friendship acres then gave way to individuals who wanted to help but didn't have fields, and so they opened their cabinets and their cupboards and they shared their clothes and their canned goods. They also began canvassing neighbor to neighbor, asking folks if they would help. In the late 60s, CROP, still at the time an acronym for that outpouring of support, grew to then be something that wasn't just Christian, wasn't just rural. Folks in our urban areas wanted to be able to help to address global hunger. And so in 1969, we started our first Crop Walk, and it was the original walkathon, original fundraising event. The LA Times calls us the granddaddy of all walkathons. And at that time, it was a pledge per mile. And so we had, for our first Crop Hunger Walk in Bismarck, North Dakota, it was 25 miles long and raised $25,000. And so the Crop Hunger Walk quickly grew. When word got out you could raise $25,000 in a weekend. And so walks began to pop up all over the United States. They are very grassroots driven. Volunteers organize and promote those Crop Hunger Walks with support of a very small Church World Service staff. And we annually have about 1,000 Crop Hunger Walks that happen in the fall and the spring. In the last couple of years, we've had about 120,000 walkers participate in one of those Crop Hunger Walks. So our 14, 15, 16, our numbers stay pretty steady with a little bit of an increase of walkers, but we were seeing while the walks were growing in size, not necessarily growing in income. So we knew we needed to do some things, and I think that's why we're here.
Very good. So the religious market is a little bit different in terms of effecting these kinds of changes. What was your experience with trying to get this change done?
Well, change is hard for anybody, and especially for many of our volunteer teams. We had walk coordinators who'd been doing it since 1969, 1970, and so we found that the grassroots nature of our planning model, that it was people within churches working together, planning it, that it was very difficult to implement change and to get the word out. But we knew that we needed, in order to grow, we needed to improve our recognition. We needed to improve our messaging so that we could train these walkers. And we knew we needed to raise more money. One of the things with the recognition is that we realized, because it was such a trickle-down effect, it was like playing telephone, that sometimes that appreciation never made it to the walkers. We didn't have a national strategy. At the time, up until recently, we were regional offices, and each regional staff handled it differently, and they would then pass it down to the walk coordinators, who then would have to trickle it down to their team captains. And so it was like that game where you say one thing, and by the time it gets to the end of the circle, it's a totally different message. I was at a meeting once where we had sent certificates out to our coordinators and asked them to provide them to their top walkers and top congregations. And I was at a meeting, and the coordinator said, "Oh, I have these certificates. Does anybody want a certificate?" I mean, what kind of thank you is that? So trying to get the word out in a way that was impactful, that people would do recognition a good way. We also had not been really communicating with directly as an organization. We had not been connecting with our walkers or our team captains. It had been mostly with the coordinators of the walks, and so it was very hard to be strategic or meaningful in the ways that we coached them, or even online. Basically, we were saying thank you for registering, and a donation was made in your name. And the result was that only about it wasn't getting down to the base, to those best practices and those best ideas. Also, because we were all offline as well, so we were losing a lot of business intelligence because we didn't have the data, because people were putting checks and cash in envelopes and mailing them in, and it was just really difficult for us to track how we were doing, to be able to change course midstream, because a lot of times we didn't get the donor information, the walker information, until months after the walk had happened.
Wow, that had to make acquisition very difficult for the next year. You were busy collating and keying in data when you should have been recruiting. Exactly. Yeah. Now, this was an interesting thing you told me, which I wouldn't have guessed was a limiting factor, but at one point, what's on screen now was limiting.
Right. Well, I mean, because we came out of the faith tradition, the bread and butter of our walk teams are from a particular faith community, and so because we're so much of a faith, so it was one church, and a lot of times the churches saw it as our church is the team, and we wanted to help congregations to think about, well, it doesn't have to just be your church. You could have your choir, you could have your men's group, you could have the youth, you could have adults, and then beyond that to say it doesn't have to just be, you don't have to just reach out to the people in your church, but you could reach out even beyond that. It was very hard to get multiple teams. We also, as we talked a little bit earlier before this call, there's a certain taboo around talking about money in churches, which, if we wanted to be able to raise more money, we were going to have to be able to talk about it, and we were going to have to be able to reach beyond just the people sitting next to you in the pew.
Mary Catherine, we have a question from Jennifer with Aga Khan, and she asked, did you use a volunteer logging system for hours for volunteers? We at Aga Khan Foundation also do nationwide events, 100% run through volunteers for international development programs, but we are leaving money on the table and losing volunteers each year as we haven't been able to track our volunteers and their hours. Could you let us know what you're doing and what your thoughts are about that?
Sure. We've one thing that I think we've done a really good job of is tracking at least the two key main volunteers for all of our events. You cannot have a Crop Hunger Walk without identifying a coordinator and a treasurer. Now sometimes it's the same person. And then beyond that, we've done we make a concerted effort to get full committee rosters into our database where we can. We aren't tracking the hours that they work. Every walk is different, and for some really good ones, they may put in several hours a month year-round, and others it's very small. So we have not tracked that. We've done a pretty good job of recognizing and affirming our event coordinators. It's what we really needed Turnkey and RallyBound to help us with was to reach beyond them, because that's where a lot of it stopped, was with those event planners, and we needed to get down to the team captains within the churches and then their walkers.
So in effect, you have conquered a bit of it in that you've gotten team captains, but I think Jennifer at Aga Khan and every other client I know, frankly, none of us track volunteerism besides fundraising very well. And Jennifer, I don't have a single client that I could say is successful at doing that at this point and figuring out how that metric is tied to revenue, which I think is where we're all going with that.
Yeah, exactly.
Mary Catherine, tell us about how difficult is it to get people who typically sit in pews and put money in an offering plate to do peer-to-peer online fundraising and peer-to-peer fundraising at all?
Well, I mean, I think the with churches in decline nationally, we had to give them resources and tools to think beyond just the passing the plate or the youth group hitting up the people coming out of the church. And so I think that's why the online platform, making it easier and really pushing it was so important, because that was a way for us to start talking about emailing outside of your congregation, reaching out to family members who live in other communities, recruiting people from your neighborhoods, that through using a very user-friendly email platform, that's a great way for us to be able to make our big donation, but it's not come from just the pockets in the pews. And it's been a slow go, but luckily with the successes that we've had, those who've done it are now our best advocates within those congregations, encouraging others to sign up online and to send out those emails.
Love it. All right. And in terms of embracing technology and an aging church population, can you comment on that?
Right. Well, that has been one of the hardest parts for us, is that so many of our crop hunger walkers are older, and I mean, some of them are still afraid to use their credit cards online. I mean, we have very low-tech crop hunger walkers in general, and so before we used Blackball, we've used TeamRaiser and Convio and Conterra, and unfortunately for our older demographic, those platforms were much too cumbersome. It was, if we could convince them to go ahead and sign up online, that their identities weren't going to be stolen, we finally got them on there, and then they would struggle, and then they would say, well, I tried, it was too hard, I'm not going to do that again. And so we really needed to get them on a platform that was a nice, easy flow, that wasn't too bulky, and that's what we found with RallyBound. It was a much more user-friendly registration process, and the tools for being successful online were built into that process, setting up a short URL and some of the things that are that previously you had to take extra steps after you would register, that this is part of the process, and has been much better for our older constituents. And then the younger folks love it too, because it has the social media parts built into it, and it's very intuitive. Plus, with RallyBound, we've also found them to be really great to work with and very responsive. We're trying lots of new things, and they've been nimble and able to innovate with us very quickly. And at the time, it was a much lower cost too, which was a great bonus, so that we could tell our constituents that we were giving them a better product for less of an expense.
I love it. So you made a lot of changes. You put them on a new platform that was easier for them to use and acknowledged some of potentially their weaknesses. You started talking to them much more frequently and aggressively, and we're going to share one statistic that I think is really impressive.
Yeah, I think this speaks to our, we did several different campaigns, but this really speaks to the acquisition campaigns that we did to really push people. One of the things that we had not been doing is even inviting past participants to register for their walk this year. So working with Turnkey to send out quality messaging with good subject lines, and we were able to move a lot of folks onto our platform from only 11% to 19% in just one season, and not even 1 year, but just in one season. I think is a tremendous improvement, and that's all. And now we have all that easy data to capture.
Yeah, I think that that's a good point. I hadn't thought about it as just in one season, but I think two big things happened. We used Turnkey used automated marketing techniques and tools to use to do the acquisition program, but we were pushing them to a place that just the user acceptance was better, and that was RallyBound's registration process. So I think that's the impact of two different efforts, or maybe three: that we talked to them at all, that we asked them at all, that we asked them in a good way, and then that we made it easy for them, and that was that made up your increase in engagement. So now what we're going to do is transition to Debbi Stanley, who is with RallyBound, and who's going to tell us a little bit about that platform and maybe point out some of the differences that the user group experienced. So, Debbi?
Thank you, and thank you, Mary Catherine, for all of your kind words. So RallyBound was founded in 2010. You can just kind of roll through these. And we began as digital technologists in the nonprofit sector. What became really obvious to us is instead of empowering the nonprofit community through the technology that was available, that technology was actually hindering their efforts. So we understood from the very, very beginning that fundraising was not a nice to have. It is a business imperative that you struggle with every day. Over the last few years, our system has evolved. Today we work with some of the top names in the space, like Church World Services and the Crop Hunger Walk, as well as some smaller community-based agencies. We like to say large or small. We are proud to serve them all. One of the things, next slide please, one of the things that really sets RallyBound apart is our fundraising tools, as Mary Catherine talked about. What never changed in our history and our evolution as an organization is that we instinctively understand the struggles inherent in fundraising. That's why when somebody graciously offers to come alongside you and help you to fundraise, you want to give them the very, very best tools you can. So, as Mary Catherine pointed out, that donor engagement is so strong with the RallyBound tools. The industry average is, and this is a conversion from a participant to a fundraiser, is about 23%. RallyBound's conversion rates run closer to 42.87%. And it's because, can you go back to this one slide really quick, Katrina? It's because of these crisp fundraising pages. They just beg to be shared out. And I know some of you on the line have some other platforms where you've got glaring white space. We use that space. We use that space to tell your story, to show your pictures, to really protect that digital footprint. Our integrated fundraising tools, our sharp social media integration, they are all designed to help those personal fundraisers do just that, fundraise for you. But, next slide please, but we always understand, that's not their job. They have a day job. And as Mary Catherine pointed out, and some of them, may be retired and a little frightened of this technology. But I'm going to segue and tell you just a little quick story. I love to cook, but I'm basically, honestly, I'm pretty bad at it. Unless I have an ironclad recipe. Step 1, do this. Step 2, do this. Step 3, do this. Then, I could be pretty good. As a volunteer fundraiser, I want my job to be that simple. Whether your system is RallyBound or somebody else out there, you want to make sure that your fundraisers know how to use the system. One of the things you brought up is, when you register for a walk or an event with the RallyBound system, you are immediately put into your fundraising tool. You don't have to go and verify your email. You don't have to go and take another step. You are immediately there and immediately asked to fundraise. That really drives those conversion numbers up. What also helps is some of these things that some of our clients provide is tip sheets, help guides. It's all about getting them engaged from day one. And of course, next slide, of course, step 1 in our recipe is always about sharing. When I was a development director and I would train a fundraiser, I would train a board member, I would train a capital campaign volunteer, we always started with what we called a Make Brave document. So think of your online platform as the modern day equivalent of that Make Brave document. It's safe. And as Mary Catherine pointed out, it's also easy. So what does it take to be a good fundraiser? Well, you want them to share your story, share their story, and then ask. So we were talking earlier that I'm doing some fundraising for my church as Katrina is, and my pastor's like, oh, we don't ask for money. Well, we as fundraisers know that's the most important thing to do, but it's so hard. But if we can do it through emails, we can do it through social media, those fundraisers are going to do it for you. They'll ask again, and then the tools let you help them, thank them, and never forget, email still works. It's the best Make Brave document we've got going on out there. And she also mentioned, next slide please, is you never want to forget those social climbers, your younger folks that like the social media. We talk a lot as professional fundraisers. Katrina, were you going to say something?
No.
Okay. We talk a lot as professional fundraisers, the time, talent, treasures. I like the adage, the money movement, or money, moments, and mind. But we forget about the one piece, their voice. Did I just lose?
Nope, we gotcha.
Okay, great. But we forget about that voice, and their voices that can so eloquently tell your story. So with a couple of easy clicks, your participants can go beyond those likes, those follows, those shares, and the RallyBound system really helps keep it simple so that they can help you, help them, help them, help you, help them, But one of the keys that Mary Catherine talked about is the engagement. Next slide, please. So it's all about engagement. I was just reading a Gallup poll that says that 56% of Americans feel disengaged from the charities that they support. And I think a big reason, well, there's lots of reasons, but one of them, and Katrina, Mary Catherine, can I get an amen, sister, here? We don't have enough time in our days to do everything we know we got to do. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. But we got to try. And even if it's just keeping it as simple as just understanding how different people will work with your system and how they want to be part of your event. You know, with the Crop Hunger Walk, the very grassroots and historical nature of that event means she had to really think differently. You know, you have Valerie, your volunteer. What will she do? How does she want to do it? And how do you need to communicate the right calls to action to get her to do those things you want her to do? Same thing with Oscar. You know, he can be very active, but we've all got an Oscar. They're like the little hamsters on the wheels, and they're doing everything and not raising a dime. You want to talk to them differently. You want to calm the sea, get them moving in the right direction. And how many webinar, seminar sessions have we sat in to try to figure out how to engage our millennials? Tell them our passion. Tell them our mission. Get them involved. It's hard and it's a struggle, but you want to segment your message to help them understand how to fundraise for you in a way that's comfortable for them. You know, Valerie, the volunteer, I was just talking to a customer a few minutes before we got on here, and she's like, oh, we've got this group of women, they want to do Zumbas. Like, oh, okay, we'll let them do Zumbas. And I showed her how on the RallyBound system she could promote her Zumba class. Give $20, donate here, and give $20 for my Zumba class. Here's all the details. So it's really having a platform and a place where your fundraisers can have a voice and a way to help you. Next step, please. Because at the end of the day, they're just people. They want to be engaged, and they want to be talked to in ways that they understand. So whether it's by you or the people that brought them to the party. You know, recently I signed up to fundraise for a nonprofit who unfortunately is using a different system. You know, I got an email when I registered, and then honestly, I haven't seen another word. I've raised almost $500 on this event and for this team that I'm part of. And it's a do-it-yourself. It's part of this thing we're doing as a group of girls. It's not a Zumba, though, I will tell you that. It is emphatically not a Zumba class. But so is this a fault of the nonprofit that they haven't communicated with me, or is it a fault of the system? Well, I would challenge that it's a bit of both. Next slide. You know, for that specific campaign, I'm on the team. But my team captain has very few tools built into her arsenal. And remember what we talked about. This is not her real job. She has a day job. She's got kids. She's got a family. She's working. She doesn't know how to fundraise. So thinking back to our very first thought in our agenda, why change platforms? Because your platform must include robust team captain tools. Because focusing on those team captains and encouraging them to push their participants to do more is one of the highest critical success factors of any peer-to-peer campaign, and it's an area that we frequently overlook.
And if I can interject, using the RallyBound platform myself this fall, the team captain tools are so intuitive, and the way that you can build community through your team. I mean, I used it to send emails, hey, let's get together beforehand, hey, this is where we're going to have our picture, hey, if you haven't done this, did you know you're going to get a shirt if you raise enough? It was very easy to build in that communication, which I think builds community.
Absolutely. And, you know, we did a session, I think, last week or 2 weeks ago with another one of our clients, and he really expounded on the way that he pushes his team captains to push their participants to compete against each other, not just against the other teams, but actually push each other to do more. Next slide, please. And one of the reasons that this is easy to do is because RallyBound has built in these robust team captain tools. So whether it's just encouraging those who have done a lot or encouraging those who have done a little, keeping it simple for them will keep that momentum rolling, keep the donation dollars flowing, and you want to build out these tools in your systems. You know, build out some emails. Whether it's RallyBound or someone else, you want to make sure that you've got a good email engine to use so that you can help tell that story in the right way. A word of encouragement can go so far in making someone, well, frankly, someone like me, feel like what they're doing matters. And, of course, Katrina's favorite part, you know, incentives, badges, buttons. Next slide. They don't hurt. It is amazing what people will do for a badge to say, look what I did. I'm a big fan of the buttons, putting the buttons on my lanyard. I'll do just about anything for a button, I'm going to tell you. But the key is just recognizing their success and celebrating their engagement with you. So, you know, just kind of close my portion up. You want to give them ways to engage with you in ways that make sense for them. You want to help your team captains really motivate and encourage those teams, and you want to recognize their success. Whether it's the fact that they've raised $1,000 or they've received 10 donations. Whatever it is, it's about engagement, keeping them coming back, helping them know what they're doing matters to you. With that, I'm going to turn it over.
Very good. Thank you so much. I'm going to take a little bit of a break here because we have a question from the audience that sort of fits squarely between the RallyBound portion and the Turnkey portion. So if the three of us could each comment on this question. Again, from Jennifer at Aga Khan. Thank you. I love people who ask questions. For the event, the peer-to-peer event, do you use the same voice, in quotes, or manner of talking to your audience? AKF, Aga Khan Foundation programs are very serious, but our events are very fun and useful. We don't want to go away from our name and brand, but we want to find better ways of talking about our fundraising events, our programs, and be useful. Mary Catherine?
Well, I think the segmented language, we talk differently with our team captains versus our walkers. But what we have done is through our Crop Hunger Walks, we talk about the event and the hunger part of what we do, and then we're working with RallyBound to start messaging after the event that helps connect to the greater organization. Within our messaging to our team captains, we're talking about, you know, hey fundraiser, hey, let's say their name, you raised $250 and $250 is seeds and tools for a struggling farmer in the Chaco. So we're slowly introducing them to the bigger scope of the impact, but then the full welcome to Church World Service won't come until after they're done with the event, if that's...
One voice for the event, and then you gradually move to the organizational voice as you try and integrate them and help them gain an affinity for the organization.
Yes.
That's fair.
I would comment that on the platform side, the RallyBound system allows you to customize your messages based on the different events that you're doing. For example, we have a variety of clients that are using specialized memorial sites. On those memorial sites, it's not about the donation. It's about sharing somebody's life through pictures and words and stories and comments and guest books. Sure, you welcome the donations, but it's much more of a somber feel to the correspondence, to the engagement with the constituents versus, hey, come out to our 5K, we're going to have a band, we're going to have, you know, beer garden, yay, yay, yay. And all of the money you're doing, as Mary Catherine said, goes to do the very, very important work that we're doing. So I think it is important to take a different voice, a different tone, depending on which message you're conveying, and your system and solution ought to be able to allow that segmentation.
Very good. All right. So what we're going to do now is move into the portion of the engagement that Turnkey provided for the crop walk, and that was basically PowerPoint going here. We designed the communications program, and we design and deploy, but we deploy using the best tool available. And in this case, we were very fortunate that RallyBound was able to deploy 2 of 4 programs for us. And what that meant was that they had the necessary triggers and filters in their system so that we could deploy this campaign in a very behaviorally triggered way. The big drivers that we use when we design programs, the first driver that Debbi mentioned is recognition. And I'll go into the psychology a little bit, but that's probably the biggest bat you swing when you try and motivate your volunteers or your fundraisers. The second big driver is social imaging, and that is exactly what it sounds like. People, one of the statistics that we use here is that only 1% of donations worldwide are anonymous, and that's not by accident. People want other people to know that they do good. Pro-social behaviors are, to put it in the context of the wild, if you're pro-social, you're likely to be accepted into your larger group and find a good mate. That's where that comes from. And then bias for consistency is, human beings, once they exhibit a behavior, are far more apt to exhibit a similar behavior again. Nose under the tent technique is what that's called. Get a little behavior, and the human's bias for consistency helps you get a bigger behavior. So those are the 3 of the big things that we use when we design systems, and then we use the best tools at hand to deploy the communication systems or communications that we deploy. In this case, for Church World Service, we used RallyBound for 2 of 4 campaigns. We used an internal tool here at Turnkey for some unusual behavioral triggering. We triggered on, I think it was the number of team members. Is that right, Mary Catherine? So that was one trigger we used. And then the last campaign, actually chronologically, the first campaign that we used was deployed within a marketing automation platform. I did get another question that's related to this. Are there good templates or chart of drip marketing that I mentioned for coaching your donors to more and for gamification? And what I would say is that the best chart in terms of using an automated marketing campaign is derived from the behaviors of your own participants. When you look at their past behaviors and you design around what you see there, you can design to the behaviors that you're looking for, and you can make use of the data that presents itself. So for example, if you happen to be the most unusual nonprofit and you collect information about volunteer leadership, you could actually integrate that into your pattern, so that when we say design a drip campaign, we start with the data, look at what we've got, and then design from there. So in that case, not really a standard chart that's perfect. Gamification is actually very much like recognition. Whenever we encourage people to the next behavior, it is a form of gamification. So one of the programs that we used with the crop walk is gamification of a sort. If you get close to $100, then we'll message you about that and encourage you. When you get there, we say thanks, we say good job, and we apply the same treatment at each recognition level. So that's very different from what had happened last year. And Mary Catherine, do you want to talk about what kinds of communications your folks received in prior years?
Very little. They would, as far back as maybe 5-6 years, they were not even, like I mentioned before, we weren't reaching out to say, thank you for walking, your walk's ready for you to walk again this year. There was no invitation to come back. And there was, thank you for registering. A donation was made in your name. Very, very basic communication. There was probably some soft communications, but those weren't anything that was naturally driven. So yeah, we didn't really talk at all. There was no marking milestones. There was no, hey, you've hit 500. Thank you. You're an awesome fundraiser. No coaching emails. We weren't sending out tips or trying to push them to the next level.
Yeah. So that increase in engagement, to at least some degree, is driven simply by the fact that you showed up finally, right?
Yeah.
We're going to talk about some of the other reasons for increase, and one of those is the heavy use of recognition that we use. If you've been on one of our webinars, you've seen this tree, and what we talk about is the behavioral economics of peer-to-peer fundraising starts with the human, and the human starts on the African savannah. So basically what that means is that most of our DNA, 98% of it, was evolved during a period when there weren't conference rooms or cell phones or processed food. They were evolved in an area like what you see on screen. And in that area, there were a few things that were really important. And one of those was staying alive. And one of the biggest ways to stay alive was to readily understand and interpret social cues. So if you were able to be part of a group effectively, you were able to stay alive and your DNA would survive. And so that attribute became selected for over time, and that's why recognition is so powerful in us. You know, the ability to coordinate and communicate successfully with the group kept us alive, and even now we're able to push that button on people. We're able to use recognition to get behaviors. Now, all that was theory until the MRI scanner. And what social scientists did was put people through an MRI scanner, and they tested their responses to things like their favorite food. And when someone in a scanner ate their favorite food, certain pleasure pathways lit up. And so the next thing they tried is, I'm going to put this lady in a scanner, and instead of giving her her favorite food, I'm going to say things to her like, wow, your input is really important, or wow, you raised $500, what a great job, or you're the smartest person in the room. And what they found was that her neural pathways lit up in exactly the same way as if she were eating her favorite food. And that they take as the proof that this is an evolutionarily derived attribute, the response to recognition. It is not, you know, just that I'm shallow and I want a really nice sweatshirt and to be proud of. It is because you can't help it. You want to be recognized and you respond to it. So what we do with recognition, we know the button is there. How are we going to use the button is what it comes down to. And the way that we use it is to build an intrinsic label. An intrinsic label is how I see myself. If you ask people who are doing volunteer work why they do it, typically they're going to say, because it's the right thing to do. And what that means is that's how I see myself. I see myself as someone who volunteers at the SPCA. I see myself as someone who works on world hunger. And that's what's called an intrinsic label, the way I see myself. And our job is to build an intrinsic label. So how do we do that? The way we do that is that we use recognition to get people to exhibit behaviors, nose under the chin technique, and that when people exhibit behaviors, they begin to basically brand themselves as a certain type of person. And they internalize that, and it begins to build their intrinsic label. And that's how we do it with recognition and messaging. I'm going to show you an example of a message that Turnkey put out for Crop Hunger Walk. I'm not sure if this one was out through which platform it went out through. But what you notice is all the red circles. And that's because it was all about them. This is, as we're talking to them, we're not really talking a lot about the mission. We're talking a lot about you. And this is one of the ways that we help people internalize the idea that they want to do this. One of the things you'll notice is that, you can't see it really well, over here, the $250 recognition level is a tumbler. And, you know, nobody goes out to raise $250 to get a tumbler. And that's by design. We always put gifts in programs like this. When we use gifts, which we don't always do, we always use gifts that are of what we call insufficient justification. The gift can never be good enough to actually get me to fundraise, because if it were good enough, then I might, my self-label might turn to, I want a tumbler and that's why I did it, instead of, I want to help with world hunger and that's why I did it. So we always make sure the gifts are never so great or that we can't put a dollar value on them. We make sure that they could never be the reason that I exhibited the behavior, because our whole job is to go back to that intrinsic label and build it instead of hurt it. And when we give gifts that are too nice, we hurt that label. And that sounds crazy, This is something that you will see Turnkey in Turnkey's collateral for the next 2 or 3 years, because we are on a quest to end the use of this word in our industry, and the word is incentive. Unless we're talking about your pay package, we shouldn't be using the word incentive with fundraisers. And this is a real culture shift for Turnkey as well as everyone else. We had a ceremonial purging at Turnkey of the word incentive, because if we're incentivizing people, then we're not building their intrinsic label. There's a wonderful body of work that all boiled down is best manifested in a book by Barry Schwartz, and it's called Why We Work. And why we work as humans, whether it's at our job or at our volunteer activity, why we work is not for money. It's for our intrinsic label. And if we translate why we work, if somehow we get the idea because of our boss or our pay plan or whatever, if we form the idea that why we work, why I work is for the money, I am 100% a miserable person, because human beings aren't built that way. Once you have taken care of your personal hygiene need, meaning I can pay my bills, my kids are safe, I'm warm, I'm fed, I feel safe, then money is no longer part of what motivates you. What motivates you at that point is your intrinsic label. So that's a long way around, but you will see Turnkey never use the word incentive in context of anything but a pay plan. We use recognition in every case for messaging and for gifts, so that we can make sure we don't hurt someone's intrinsic label. So, any questions on that? I think we're good. Okay, now we're going to move into results. So, and Mary Catherine, correct me if I misspeak anywhere, total online fundraisers for fall in 2015, 10,410. In 2016, 11,197. So a nice bump there. And Mary Catherine, can you talk about the events in the ones that you got rid of?
Yeah. So I think this is great that we had an increase, but it's even more impressive when you understand that we lost on our books. We dropped several hundred crop hunger walks from fall of 15 to fall of 16. Some of those were ones that were on the books, just that were 1 or 2 events, or 1 or 2 walkers, and not big events. But in general, we had projected of those that canceled or postponed about a $400,000 and significant number of walkers total. So this was an increase even with a smaller event pool from which to work.
We were pretty excited, and commensurately income has gone up from $952,000 to $1.2 million over the 2 years, and predictably the average fundraising went up as well from 91 to 109. One of the things that we did with the data was we looked at people just online. We thought, wouldn't it be interesting to look at people who were fundraising in 2015 fall, and compare them to people who were fundraising in 2016 fall. So people who were engaged with us, so simply going online was not the big differentiator, but the platform and the way we were handling them were big differentiators. So when we looked at that audience, here's what we found. And Mary Catherine, I don't think you've seen this. We really wanted to see, of people inclined to fundraise online already, forget the people that we brought in, did they change? And indeed they did. Their fundraising went up as compared, what we're looking at here are activated fundraisers year over year, which was an interesting statistic. And then lastly, and most important, we looked again at activated fundraisers. And I would say this is the most important statistic in the deck, in that the median of activated fundraisers in year 2 went up considerably. And that's when you know you've had a success, when the median increases, which this did. So I would count this as the pure impact of the changes that you made, controlling for the aptness of individuals to fundraise online. So that is our deck, folks. If you have any questions, you can pop them over really quickly, but we are right at our time. And I want to thank Mary Catherine and Debbie for being with us. Any final thoughts, Mary Catherine?
Thank you. This was
No, I'm just grateful to have both Turnkey and RallyBound to help us to have such a good increase this year. We're looking forward to more.
Me too. And Debbie, thank you so much. Any final thoughts?
No, I just, you can see how the numbers bear it out. Using a stronger platform, better messaging, it all works. It works. The numbers show it.
It does. Sometimes digging the data out is long and slow and cumbersome, but it is definitely worth doing because it's the only way you can really know is once you're digging around inside the data. So I want to thank everyone. There will be another webinar in a month or so from Turnkey. We don't have it planned yet, but you can be sure you will get an email when we do have it on the books. So thank you so much for joining us. We hope to see you at Peer-to-Peer Forum in Atlanta coming up soon. Thanks a bunch, guys. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye.